Very good.
So yeah, we can't find it on Synopsis.
You can't. Okay, I will look into it. Thank you very much. My apologies. What have I done with that? I hope I haven't spooked some undergraduate students when this turns up in their module. Good morning.
Yeah, and I think I left, hopefully, my... Morning, everyone.
I haven't taken anything.
Oh, there was nothing on here. You don't do.
Have I buried something?
I mean, I don't know.
Feel free to.
So my phone seems to think that they're still alive.
Your phone?
No, so there's on my, no, my, what do you call them? Yeah, earphones.
Oh, the earphones.
Yeah. I thought I had them here yesterday.
Have you asked at the reception?
No, so I've only just come in.
Yeah.
To check, because I was teaching yesterday here until 3.
Uh-huh.
So I thought maybe, that's a nice pen. Good one to use. Oh well, I'll leave you to it. I will ask the reception.
Yeah, they might have. Sometimes. No.
No. So I had them. Yeah, I left them just on here. I remember.
Yeah.
Just like on here.
I would have noticed.
Yeah, you will have noticed. Yeah, that's it. Maybe someone's picked them up. Thank you so much.
I would have nicked them, but.
Yeah, useless without their case. You see. They need.
Oh, you can buy a case for 20 quid.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Sorry. I should have told her that it's recorded. Never mind. Never mind. Can somebody please try out the code? It works? Yes! Done an entire module without major screw-ups. Hey. It works. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. But let's hope that it all works.
It works.
Sorry?
It works.
It works? Good. That's the code. That works. Let's hope that the recording works. But that's the next stressor for me. Say something. Yes, it says that it is recorded. But sometimes it doesn't mean anything because then the sound doesn't work. It's just. You need to have a computer degree to do lectures here. Anyway, a most wonderful good morning, ladies and jelly beans. I was told that the code works, so please do register your attendance. And the plan for today is, first I want to show you something that is a very common issue when people do statistics or when people publish something or when people actually read publications and get information from there. And I want you to sort of appreciate that sometimes things are not necessarily as they seem to be. And we were talking yesterday about gut feelings, that sometimes, gut feelings, if you've got a gut feeling, go to the toilet, but don't do statistics, right? I think that would be my advice. That shouldn't be too long, but hopefully it sort of gets the message across. We need to look into things. And then I want to introduce to you the second assessment. And I know you are incredibly keen on getting that started. What the philosophy of this assessment is, because it will be a slightly different thing to what you probably have done so far. And yeah, we'll just simply take it from there. Okay? Has everybody registered? Fantastic. Let's see if we've got some people still coming. Nope. Okay, so the thing that I want to show you where we very often, we might be right, but we might not be right, is something that I came across in a recent discussion and sort of papers. Good morning. If you are very quick, I show you the attendance code. The attendance code is here. You've got exactly 20 seconds. Uh-huh. Okay, good. Please do register your attendance, otherwise you get emails and things like that. Okay. So, okay. So, very often we find in publications sort of error bars in when there are measurements. So here, for example, you find, and the annoying thing very often is that we don't know what these error bars indicate. If you are lucky, then it says in the legend, the error bar indicates the standard deviation. Yeah, and that is what very often is shown in figures. So let's assume we've got two samples here. Sample 1, and we assume it is continuous sample and it is derived from a normal distributed population or something like that. So, you know, box standard stuff, really. And this is supposed to have a mean of, say, 50 with a standard deviation of 10. So we would get 60 and 40 here. And we have a large sample size, say 10,000 or something like that. And we look at a sample 2, where we have the mean of 53. We also have a standard deviation of 10. So that's our estimated population standard deviation between 63 and 43, and also a large sample size. And our sort of intuition tells us, well, what does it tell us? Are these two samples significantly different from each other? What would you say?
No.
No, they are not different from each other. You're absolutely right. They're not different from each other because the difference between 50 and 53 is not great. And the error bars are really not totally, but nicely overlapping, right? So our intuition says they are not statistically significantly different from each other. Fantastic. Well done. Well, maybe just to be on the safe side, let's just simply do a little test. We've got two samples here, continuous data, and these data come, we assume, from a normal distributed population. What would be your suggestion for a statistical test whereby we can compare these two data sets? Make a suggestion. What would be a good test? And we had this discussion yesterday.
Oh. Well, sample t-test, right?
Absolutely right. A two-sample t-test, and in this case, a Welch test. Yep, because we, bless you, although the Welch test is, you know, appropriate if the variances or standard deviations are different, but it gives us also a good result if they are the same. You are absolutely right. Let's do a Welch test, yeah? And let's see, just to confirm our intuition. So I have done that, and I've used the online calculator, yeah? And you can actually do that by simply adding, or instead of including the raw data, you can do the sample mean, the standard deviation, and the count for sample 1 and sample 2. Now look at that. P is much smaller than 0.001. This indicates there is a very strong, significant difference between the two samples. And if you look at the sort of the graphic representation, you see that the two populations are, I would say, light years apart. So, although the error bars overlapped nicely, our two samples are vastly different. Our gut feeling, again, was shite. Forgive the pun. Yeah? Okay. That's a bummer. So we need to do a test. Surely, if we turn that around, turn it upside down, see it the other way around, then we can trust our gut feeling. Let's say I have two samples here, same scenario. The means are vastly different. 50, standard deviation of 5, sample size, well, it's small, 3, but that's what we get. Sample 2 has a mean of 60 and a standard deviation of 4. And what we see is that the error bars don't overlap. Yeah? And the error bars are, again, the standard deviations. And here as well. What's your gut feeling? Are the two samples indeed significantly different from each other? Yes or yes? Yes, because you're absolutely right. The error bars don't overlap in this case. Yeah, so they are different from each other when we look at that. Right? Excellent.
So I did the t-test and it says the p-value is 0.057.
What did I get? I got p value equals 0.057. Are they different? With a significance level of alpha, 0.05? No, they are not. Bloody gut feeling, eh? Here, we very clearly have the error bars not overlapping, and yet the samples are not different. Here, the error bars are really nicely overlapping, and the samples are vastly different. What the hell is going on? The reason why we see these sort of incoherent, or why we see these results that are not in line with what we expect, what we feel should be right, what would be our intuition, lies in the sample size. The larger your sample size, the wider apart are these populations from each other. And a large sample size makes, in a way, if you think about it, a large sample size makes a difference significant. On the other hand, if you have a small sample size, it makes a difference less significant. Because it makes the confidence intervals, not the standard deviations, the confidence intervals wider. Yeah? Does it make sense? So, you can take that to an extreme, actually. You can say, in my research, for example, I want to investigate whether a certain drug has an effect on cancer, whether it can cure cancer. And what you can do is you can say, I want to see an effect. I believe in this drug. I want this drug to work. I want to see an effect. So I have my drug and my placebo. What do I need to do to make this drug work? I just simply increase the sample size. Maybe from, say, 100 samples to 10,000 samples, to 1 million samples. Because then, even if the difference is absolutely negligible, but when I increase the sample size to huge numbers, even the smallest, most insignificant difference all of a sudden will become significant.
Is that only true if both of the populations, or both of the, populations are large? Or like, could you only do 1 million treated with drug and 100 placebo?
Oh, that's a very good question. What will happen is that with the 1 million, your confidence interval will be very small. With the larger population, your confidence interval will be larger. So you could potentially sort of do a little bit of trickery until you actually get the result that you want. This is a technique that is called p-hacking. And it is totally frowned upon. You should not adjust your sample size to a level where you get the result that you are actually looking for. Yeah? What you need to do is you first need to make sure that you stipulate what are my sample sizes before you actually do the measurements and calculate a p-value. Anything else is p-hacking, and scientifically is bad. Is it done in the industry? Absolutely, everybody does it. But that doesn't mean that it's right. Yeah? So hands off p-hacking. Another thing is, we set the p-value here is 0.057. Let's say the p-value was 0.049. Yeah, so say 0.049. What would 0.049 actually indicate if we've got a significance level of alpha being 5%? Significant or not? 0.049. Sorry? Barely. I love that. I really love that. Thank you very much. It is sort of, it's close to 0.05. So interesting. Because we need to remind ourselves, what does the p-value do? The p-value is basically a dichotomous decision tool. If it is below 0.05, or whatever alpha we set, it is significant. If it is above 0.05, it is not significant. That is Jup. But p-value does not tell us in any way how close it is. So when you say barely, you sort of almost implied, oh, well, a little bit more and we could make this insignificant. Or a little bit less and we can make this result significant. And again, that is exactly not what a p-value does. Look at it like a p-value is like a pregnancy test. You either are pregnant or you're not, right? It doesn't tell you how many months you are pregnant. And if you pee on it again, right, then it still doesn't make you pregnant, whether you want it or not, or the other way around. Thank God I'm pregnant. I just thought I was fat.
Well, what about, I mean, I feel like in a lot of these graphs, you have symbols to indicate how significant it is based on the p-value.
Yes. What you sometimes see is something like that, right? That is very often included by programs that actually calculate the significance. Yeah. And when you do, for example, these things in R, it will give you these symbols and says, in this case, usually there will be a legend where it says highly significant, so P smaller than 0.001 or something like that. That is absolutely fine, because then there is already, the program does what we have just done, not just relied on the standard deviation, but already calculated a proper test and checked whether the p-values are significant or not. My advice to you as scientists would be, when you create figures like that, standard deviations are nice because they tell you the spread or the estimated spread in the population. but they are totally useless, as we have just seen, when you want to help your readers to compare things. What you could and what you should do actually is scrap the standard deviations and instead substitute them with the 95% confidence intervals. Because the 95% confidence intervals actually include the sample size and therefore are a far better indicator for the differences between samples. And if you look at, for example, this one here, what you see here in the first example, we had a standard deviation of 10, but the confidence intervals are so much smaller. So if you include the confidence intervals instead of standard deviations, you don't have this problem with the gut feeling and being wrong, because you immediately see then in this case here, let's take a different color. It would be something like that here for the confidence intervals. And that now looks very clearly, confidence intervals, if they don't overlap, we can be fairly confident that the samples are different.
That's also called standard.
Sorry?
That's also called standard error?
Yes, we would. Well, for the continuous data, we said we can calculate. So we would here have the. How shall I do that? This part here, that would be the margin of error. And we said for continuous data, we can calculate the margin of error. That would be the t statistics times s over square root n. With a huge sample size like that, the t statistic is roughly 1.96. So that is like a normal distribution times standard deviation. We had 10. And our sample size was 10,000 square root of, so that's 100. So that would be the margin of error and the corresponding confidence interval. Make sense? Happy with that? Now, the p-values don't tell us how close things are, because we can, in a way, as I told you, we can manipulate the p-values and make it significant so that we do see a difference. But if we want to be really honest, what we should then do is give a p-value and also include what we discussed, an effect size. An effect size actually tells us how far away these samples in reality are and whether it matters. So very often when we have these continuous data, and I discussed that very briefly with you, a typical effect size would be, for example, Cohen's d. If we've got an effect, and I showed you how we can calculate that with pooled standard deviations, the effect size tells us how far apart these things are, the samples. The p-value just tells us, yes, you are pregnant or you're not. Effect size gives you exactly the time of basically how far you are. Make sense? So it's always a good idea to, when you present results, say what the standard deviation is. That's fine. That's great. Yeah. Also, say what the 95% confidence interval is. Say what the sample size is. Say what the p-value is. Say, if you can, what the effect size is. When you do experiments, these are things that would be great if you were able to report them. Happy with that? Fantastic. Okay, let's go to the assessment. Are you ready? Brilliant. Let's see if I can find that. Okay, if people haven't, please record your attendance very quickly. And the assessment brief, it is called Assessment 2, I think, on Moodle, is available on Moodle and also on my wonderful Research Skills website. So let me quickly head over to that. So this is the Advanced Research Skills website. I will send out the link to it again in the Moodle communication. And under more, you should find a rubric called Assessment. Yeah, here we are. Now, what I want you to do in this assessment, and this is really an assessment where you have to do a little bit of research yourself. It's not just asking you about things. This research, hopefully, you will find extremely useful when you do your dissertation project in the summer, either lab or, well, I should say, master's project in the summer. Some people do dissertations, some people do lab project. Hopefully, you will find that useful. Here is your assessment brief, and you might not necessarily see this. What I want you to do is sort of an independent literature research and data analysis. I will give you a list of topics which I thought are quite interesting. So here are the list of topics. And hopefully there is something that is, quite sexy, quite topical. This topic, you pick one, and that is your topic of choice. It does not have to totally align with your course. So if you are on the biotechnology program, but you find something interesting in infectious diseases, by all means, choose this topic. Or in reproductive medicine or something like that, yeah? But please stick to these topics. So select one topic, and this is your topic. And I want you to work on that. As you see, The topics are sort of quite broad. It will be your job. That is probably one of the hardest things that you are ever going to do in research. You have to translate this very broad umbrella topic into something that you can research. Meaningfully research. Because in terms of research, what we don't want to see is just simply taking a couple of papers and do a summary. That's not really research. ChatGPT can do that, probably better than we do it. What we want to do is we want to have certain questions. The important thing with these questions is that they need to be verifiable and quantifiable. So, for example, we might have a very general research question, let's say, therapies in the treatment of HIV. Certainly an interesting topic. And we now need to home in on one, and I only want you to do one question. We now need to home in on one question that we are going to research in this sort of assessment project. One question could be, is a particular treatment more effective for HIV patients than another treatment? So I translate, or I bring down this umbrella project or the umbrella topic, treatment HIV, down to, I narrow it down to one question. I focus on a particular treatment and say, I want to compare this particular treatment to, let's say, another treatment. And that is what I call the translation of a project into a quantifiable and verifiable research question. Why? Because we could say, for example, multi-drug treatment is more effective than another treatment, than a single drug treatment. But now we have the opportunity to quantify it. We can say, we take some data from the multi-drug treatment, for example, virus load, multi-drug treatment of 10 patients, and compare it to the virus load of another group of patients who have received only one drug. We have our data. We can say, oh, cool. We do a t-test, maybe, or Poisson, when we have count data or something like that. We get a p-value. And now we can say, and nobody can argue with us, we can say multi-drug treatment is far more efficient than single drug treatment. And we can write this down.
Statistical analysis of different
don't hyperventilate. Don't worry.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So these are the question or the topics. So choose one topic. Section 2 or question or task 2. Use the PICO framework. Are you all familiar with the PICO framework? No? Brilliant. I've got it here. The PICO framework is something incredibly useful, and I want you to sort of apply that. PICO is an acronym. P stands for population. I is the intervention. C is the control. O is the outcome. And it's not always a T given, that is the time frame. So let's go back to the example of HIV and say, right, who is the population that we are looking at? Obviously, we are looking at people with HIV. So population would be, well, it could be people who are HIV positive. Yeah? Or it could be young men under the age of 35 who are HIV positive. This P allows you to exactly specify what we are looking for. This is actually a framework that is incredibly helpful, not just when you perform research, but when you also read research papers. Always have this PICO at the back of your mind. Who is the population? What is the intervention? So the intervention here would be a particular drug or treatment strategy. Yeah? What would be to control? Sometimes when we look at the efficiency of a drug, it could be, for example, a placebo or a different strategy, administration, or something like that. Yeah? What is the outcome? That is also very challenging sometimes. The outcome is not the result that we see, it is actually the variable that we want to measure. So for example, here we could measure virus load. Yeah? How many virus particles are observed in a population of cells, yeah, in the placebo and in the control and in the drug treatment. Absolutely right. Yeah. And sometimes we look at a time frame where we say, okay, we do this over 12 months, for example, this treatment, and it's very useful to also state that. Does that make sense? Yeah. So, sorry.
Virus load.
Virus load. Yeah. Sorry. My writing goes out of the window.
It's just, it depends on what we're trying to measure.
The outcome is what you are going to measure. It's the variable that you are actually measuring. Yeah? It could also be, for example, how many people die during that period. Yeah? Or how many people get cured. But what it requires you is to be specific. Because that then allows you really to make sure that you are not sidetracked in your research and that you end up with something that is quantifiable. Okay. So that's number 2. Number 3, give a justification for the selection of the research question. So here the research question would be, obviously, are there 2 different drug treatments, for example? Are they the same or are they different in terms of virus load, in terms of outcome?
For the C control, is the C also called comparison?
It would be comparison. Yeah. Comparison or control. Yeah.
This will give us the quantifiable question.
Absolutely. Yeah. This will almost kick your butt to get a quantifiable question. Yeah. Now, what I want you to do is also give a brief justification. This is something that when you do research and when you apply for research funding, you need to tell people why is your research important. Yeah. So give a justification. You can, for example, say, well, HIV is still massive, let's say, in sub-Saharan Africa. Would be interesting to have, for example, a little bit of a statistics in there. Yeah. This is, why is it important? Why is it now important? Why do I need to give you money right now to do this research? Yeah. And that is one part that I want you to do. So, you are absolutely right. Maybe I should probably call it, what would be the impact of your research? Yeah.
You have already chosen the topics, so it might be significant for you already.
Yes, absolutely. It might be totally significant to you, but you need to tell me why it is so significant.
For me.
No, just in general.
In general, not just for you. I mean, yeah, you're right. I mean, to be perfectly honest, being absolutely brutal, I don't care if you've got HIV and if you're dying, right? But I want to know, why the hell should I give you money to do this research? Yeah, why? And why now? Yes, yes, you are right. It is, but don't oversell it, please. Yeah. And you will find that this is one of the biggest challenges when you apply for research funding. Yeah. Everybody wants money. Yeah. Everybody wants money. Why should I give you my money? Come up, tell me why this is so important. You are all familiar with the elevator pitch. Yeah? Elevator pitch is, you've got exactly 12 seconds to convince the CEO of Google in the elevator from ground floor to top headquarters why your project is the bee's knees, the dogs, whatever. Yeah? And you need to be absolutely concise. Don't tell them that, yeah, you know, my grandma had HIV and things like that, and, you know, things like that. Infertility is genetically caused. Okay, forget that. That's total nonsense. But, you know, Why is it important? Why now? Okay, I want you then also say, go back to your outcome variables, and that is where data analysis comes in. What kind of data are your outcome variables? And again, that kicks your butt in terms of don't be wishy-washy, because you need to be absolutely specific what, that's step 4, what you actually measure. Sorry? So the question is, clearly state the data type. So that's this one here. Clearly state the data types of the outcome variable. Is it count data? Is it continuous data? Virus load, for example, you measure a concentration, it's probably Poisson distributed counts. Yeah? Is it a proportion? Where you, for example, say 60% kicked the bucket with the placebo, whereas 30% died with a drug treatment. So you've got a percentage, which is probably a binomial distributed data. It will force you to think about the values for your data, for the outcome. 5, oh, that's going to be a good one. Carry out a literature search addressing the research question. So you say, for example, I want to compare these two drug treatments. So I want to know what has been done in terms of drug treatment. Yeah, makes sense? So I want you to do a sort of a mini literature research for your question that you have selected, that you have narrowed down. Now, I'm fully aware that you may or may not have done literature research. So therefore, on my website, I've got some guidelines on how to search the literature. Of course, PubMed. Yeah. And what's always absolutely essential is that you not just simply go there and say, oh, let's see what PubMed knows about a particular topic. It will probably come up with 100,000 hits, especially if you not just use PubMed, but also, let's say, Google Scholar or something like that, or Web of Science. There will be loads and loads and loads of papers. Life is too short. You can't read all these papers. So you need to have a search strategy. And again, there is a video about a search strategy. So you can identify certain parameters. I want to search for, let's say, HIV. I want to look for multi-drug treatment. I want recent papers. So anything before, say, the year 2000, I can disregard. I want, to narrow it down, I want predominantly men in Sweden. Just made that up. Yeah. So you define a search strategy. You identify keywords. You identify what is called inclusion criteria. That is what I want included in my research or in the literature. This is what I want to be excluded. So I don't want any papers before 2000. I don't want any papers that are looking at, for example, pregnant women. with HIV because it might be an added level of complexity, and they might not receive the multi-drug treatment because of being pregnant. So I can do that. I can actually use MeSH terms, medical significant terms, and there is a video that allows you to deal with that. Now, the next thing, so carry out a literature search, formulate a research strategy, and state keywords and phrases used. You might need to refine your strategy. If you get 150,000 papers, you have to narrow it down. What are the criteria that by which you narrow them down? Yes?
Also location, also the research happened
where the research happened. So you start with, say, 150,000 papers. You then realize, wait a moment, 100,000 of these papers are not relevant, yeah, because they sort of show something very different. I need to refine my search strategy. And what you then need to do in order to be a good scientist is...
Also, we might want to check the citations if the paper is cited well.
Is the paper very well cited? Actually, is the paper in English? Yeah? You might end up with, fantastic paper in a Chinese dialect. Okay, you could say Google Translate, maybe, yeah, but maybe not. Surely there must be something better out there.
Couple French papers, German papers, they're really good.
They are good.
They have better.
Yeah, but you need to understand what they say. Yeah, that's the problem. And then the big question is, why did they publish that in an obscure journal of irreproducible results in one of their 150,000 African languages and not in a major paper? Another question is, can you get hold of the paper? Yeah. What if the library doesn't have the paper? Or behind a paywall? Well, usually that shouldn't be a big problem, but for you it might be a problem, so you might disregard it. What I want you to do in this case is create what is known as a Prisma flowchart. So here, literature search, MeSH terms perhaps, keywords, inclusion, exclusion criteria. And you need to document your search strategy and how you selected the papers. Yeah. What does a Prisma flowchart actually look like? Very common in clinical trials, because in clinical trials you have to document basically everything. And here, what you see is you identify, for example, 9,340 papers from a database, let's say PubMed. That is your initial search. You then remove 4,325 because they are duplicates, and you can ask, for example, Google Scholar or PubMed to remove duplicates. So that leaves you with a number. You then can say, they don't really meet my research criteria, so I remove them. And I'm down to, let's say, 194 papers that are potentially interesting. That's the first screening step, but you need to document that. And this Prisma flowchart is really good for that. You then say, okay, let's have a look at these 194. Let's have a brief squint at the abstract. Well, the abstract doesn't look too promising, so I exclude 124. So I've got 70 papers, which might look more interesting. But of these 70 papers, 53 I could not access because A, the library didn't have them, or I couldn't get them online, or, and obviously that's not something that you would say, I was just simply too lazy to check. Yeah, but you don't say that, right? So 53, no full text or no free access. So we've got 17. And then you go a little bit deeper. These are the papers that are worth reading. And you say, oh, okay, I need to exclude a few papers because the sample size is so small, it doesn't make sense. Or they used the wrong test, or something like that. Yeah, or God knows what they did. Totally no idea. Let's exclude it. And eventually, you end up with a very small number of papers with which you can work. So I want you to do such a literature search for your topic with a Prisma flowchart. Make sense?
The time frame of publication, how longer it should be published, like in the past 5 years, 10 years? Yes.
I would probably do it the other way around. I would say, okay, how many papers do I get in the first place? I want to end up with, let's go back here. Create a Prisma flowchart, probably 5 to max 10 papers.
This is the first filter that I would be interested in doing. I would be interested in reading the latest research rather than like 100 years back.
Yeah, absolutely. So it needs to be reasonable. Yeah? Make sense? Okay, so we've done our literature search. Now, if you were to conduct a research project, you then would go into the literature and retrieve data that would confirm or reject your working hypothesis that you would use as evidence. Yeah, and these data obviously would be linked to your outcome data. Yeah, that would be for a normal research project. So you would have to look, does this paper actually have the outcome data that I want in a way that makes sense to me? Do they report the correct, mean, standard deviation, things like that? And then I can compare it with other papers and so on and so forth. Challenging. Very challenging, right? I don't want you to do that. You don't have to do that. If you want, great. Don't have to do it. This, what I want you to do is create a mock data set. Create your own data. This is the only time that you can create, that you can fabricate your own results. Absolutely. You don't need to go to the papers and extract the data. Yeah, that is an assessment. Yeah. And when I do a similar session with our final year project students, where they need to be they can't make up data. like you, they have to actually find the data that then confirm that they can work with in their project. And that is incredibly challenging, because what usually happens is you have a fantastic PICO framework. You know exactly what your question is. You know exactly what values you want to compare to the PICO. And then you do the literature research. And you think, blow me with a feather. There's no data. Or the data don't make sense. What are you going to do then? You cry, sit in the corner, and despair of life because you can't find the data. You have a fantastic question, but you can't find the data for that. So if you are ever in a position like that, shall I tell you how to cheat? Who wants to cheat? Hands up. I want to cheat, of course.
We want to have an idea how to cheat. We don't necessarily do it.
So I tell the final year students, why don't you do it the other way around? You've done a literature search. You have a good idea of what is out there. You had a look at a lot of papers. You see data. Why don't you say, I've got the data, I've got the answer. Let's think about a question. So in a way, you go back to your initial question for which you've done the PICO and say, what would be a good question that I can answer with these data? For final year project, fantastic. For a research project, absolutely unsuitable, because in the research project, you have the question first, and then you're looking for the data. But you could, for example, say, I'm looking for some data about multi-drugs treatment. Oh, look at that. I found 3 papers where they looked at men in South Africa with this particular multi-drug regime. Now, this is going to be my research question. Oh, I found another paper in Southeast Asian men about a similar drug treatment. And my question now could change. I can say, is there a difference in the drug treatments when it comes to geographic location? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so I can use this. That makes sense. So, however, in your case, you are at liberty to make up mock data that you want to use in your analysis. This could be as simple or as complex as you want. You could, for example, say, with these mock data, I look at a particular biomarker, or I look at virus load. Virus load. Placebo. Treatment. I make up some data. Right? Now, if these are count data, can use that, or we can say maybe a biomarker. And we've specified what the data are in the outcome already from the PICO, yeah, and in the data type. So we know what these data are. And what we can do now is, of course, we can do a statistical test. How do we start a statistical test? We formulate a hypothesis. Yeah? So, create a mock data set, select an appropriate statistical test, and formulate a null and alternative hypothesis. Spell it out. Null hypothesis is there is no difference between the two populations from which the samples were taken, can be explained by sampling error. Alternative hypothesis is the negation of the null hypothesis, what we have done. Okay? You do the test, what's the p-value? Then I want you to write and report that, what you found, with your mock data. So I want you to write an abstract. Abstract writing, again, is incredibly challenging. Let me see if I find that. Because a lot of people just simply start writing the abstract. That's not a good idea. There is a defined structure. So the first one probably sounds familiar because that is what we discussed. That is your justification. Give me a little bit of background. Why do you want to study HIV? Why was this study important? Sell it to me. Yeah? Great idea with the marketing. I love that. Why is it important? Why now? Give me some numbers. Don't just simply say people are dying of HIV. Yeah, I know that. But is it a problem actually? If you got HIV, you probably think it is a problem, although we've got now very good drug regimes. So, you know. You also need to specify what was the aim. What is the scope of this research? I wanted to compare two different drug regimes. Be absolutely specific and do yourself a favor. Don't be subtle. Your reviewers are not people who like to read between the lines. Oh yeah, that is what they mean. No. Tell me, in no uncertain terms. The scope was to investigate, here comes the PICO again into play, to investigate whether a multi-drug treatment is more effective than a single drug treatment in South African young men. Yeah? Be absolutely specific. This says basically it is drug treatment, HIV, men, South Africa. You sometimes can even say we did not look at the drug treatment for pregnant women. Makes it absolutely clear. How was it conducted, the research? In our case, it would be a literature research using PubMed, Google Scholar, whatever, in which relevant publications were selected. You can include keywords here, using the keywords such and such. So people can reproduce it and they immediately see it in the abstract. Usually the abstracts are free anyway, so people see what you have done.
Are you also going to mention your mock experiment where you got the data, or is that?
You absolutely You can do that, especially when it comes to more experimental data, where you say, we tested on 150 patients, what will happen if we inject them with HIV and give them at the same time a drug. So be absolutely specific, be very concise, be very precise with it. Of course, tell us what are the results. What did you find? We found that multi-drug treatment reduces the virus load 15-fold. Be careful, you want to probably include a confidence interval here. You need to specify again precisely how what you found. I'll come back to that in a minute. Sorry? Do we have a break? Yeah, we can have a 5-minute break. Yeah. Let's do a 5-minute break. Sorry about that. But does that make sense? It's a big project for you guys. But in the past, people did very well on it.
If we're not 100%, if we're not confident, 95% confident ourselves in what kind of data or what kind of statistics to do, can we check?
Yeah, within reason.
Okay.
Within reason.
Yeah.
But I'm not doing the analysis for you guys.
Can we include that feeling?
Sorry?
Can we include that feeling?
The gut feeling. Absolutely. Yeah. Sorry?
So you said about injecting HIV and the drug, or like efficiently.
In this case, I would probably, for the sake of this assessment, I would probably not go too much into ethics. Yeah? Because we would assume that usually you would have received ethical approval, and that is something beyond. You could, if you want, you could say ethical approval was granted. Yeah, for benefit of the doubt. If you put that into the abstract, although it is usually something that is more or less goes without saying. You would not be able to publish until ethical approval had been. Yeah. Sorry?
I was wondering because I was going to do infectious diseases.
Yeah.
I think other similar assignments I've had, we can't give a placebo against a drug if there's
That's an interesting one. Absolutely. Yeah. And so one would need to think about how you could work around with that. Yeah? And there are actually, if you do a little bit of Googling, there are methods where you can work actually without a placebo. And you might have in the experimental design something that's called a quasi-experiment. There are also different sort of studies in a way. Good thing you reminded me. I probably should mention that this could also be in the abstract, the experimental design. Yeah, let's add that. Scope. Let's put that in here. Experimental design. Yeah. Let's go back to this one here. Study design. Yes. So we've got here a whole raft of different study designs. Does that make sense what I'm saying here? Yeah. Does that make sense what I'm saying? Can you do it?
I was just thinking about this one topic, that is the role of biotechnology in sustainable agriculture, enhancing crop resistance and yield. So what I have done in my undergrad, I did a meta-analysis. I did a literature
Brilliant.
review. I've literally compared the past 5 years of data and
Yes.
from China, US, and from the regions that are really good in genetically modified crops, for example, cotton. So what I did was I selected like top 20 researches done in the past 5 years. Like have it just put it there with 6. So I selected top 20 researches and I researched what were the protein levels of crops before for the normal crop and for the genetically modified crop. So that was the total quantifiable data that I literally put in a very, very big ass table, and I got it published in Elsevier. So this is, I understand what you're coming from, but do you think I should stick with the same topic, or I should, switch to some other thing? Because
Um,
I want to
make your life, it depends on you. If you want to embark on something new and try it out, go for something
I want
different.
to see what kind of research quantifiable data. Because when my supervisor was like, choose a topic, and I was literally interested in agriculture that time. I wasn't really interested to move to environment. I was like, okay, let's do agriculture. So what I did out there was I didn't go from question to answer. I went from answer to question. I was like,
Is that what I trust?
exactly. Which is good because of course I was interested in research that should have some quantifiable data. I wasn't going to like spend 8 months of my 2 semesters there and just no research data out there. So I was interested in BT cotton. I was interested in cotton is very important crop in Pakistan because it's a staple for us. It's like textile industry. It's very important for Pakistan. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna research on a crop that is very economically important for my own country. So my professor was like, you have to give me a topic that is economically important for your country. Because if you want to stay here in this country, you want to do a research that's economically important. So I was like, okay, let's do for cotton because we are like 5th biggest producer of cotton in the world. So I'm gonna do it because in our country we have a very extreme high temperature where crop doesn't survive. So I was interested in investigating the abiotic stresses that cotton gets, and it doesn't survive in that. So China and US was producing the genetically modified BT cotton, which could thrive on 55 degrees as well. So the reason was that 40% of crops all around the world, cotton, it gets rotten just due to high temperatures. So by introducing the GM crop, we could literally save a lot of cotton all around the world, and the industry would bloom. So this is why I chose this, and I'm just checking the topics out there, and it looks so relevant that I could.
Go for it.
Crop resistance?
Go for it. If you want.
Yeah, because the data is very good because
Yeah.
it has literally a quantifiable data of
Yeah.
protein content before
Yeah. Exactly what.
because I don't want to indulge myself like we have literally just 2 weeks and I don't want to indulge myself in something that
3 weeks.
3 weeks.
17,
Yeah, we have
18,
so much
19.
other things to do as well. Blogs and essays. Professor DeWitt has given like 3 blogs, so I have to like complete those as well. So yeah, I was thinking maybe because so we don't have to stick with biomedicine because I am doing biomedicine. So it's a topic of biotechnology. Okay.
As long as it is remotely covering one of these topics, absolutely fine with me.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Happy with that?
And that was I wrote like 9,000 words.
Sorry?
9,000 words.
No.
No, I did there.
Oh,
back.
yeah.
It was
But
like,
for that, I just want an abstract with 300 words. Yeah? Okay. Let's carry on. with the abstract very quickly. I just in the break I had a discussion, and I realized I should have also included a little bit on experimental design, because that is usually also very important to mention that in the abstract. What was the experimental design, if there was an experimental design, for example? And what do I mean? Again, on my wonderful website, there is a rubric that is called Study Designs, where you can have all sorts of design types. So, for example, it could be a case report. It could be a descriptive study that was carried out. You can have a variety of study designs, for example, a cohort study or a case control study or something like that. And I would suggest have a look at these different study designs that are available. That becomes particularly important when should you ever do some biomedical research, where, for example, as you mentioned, when you do infectious diseases, it is problematic to say, right, I have people who were infected with, say, malaria or something like that. One group gets the drug and the other group gets a placebo, right? Why is that problematic? There's a problem with the ethics. Who do I sort of basically condemn to suffer and die potentially from malaria? So I can't really do that, but I can do other things. I can do, for example, a study where I look at people who have taken the drug and another group of people for whom the drug was not available. And I can follow them over time, what happened to them, by just going back to the data. So it's not me who is refusing the drug in this particular case. It is, I'm looking at what happened to people who did not have the drug, but not because I didn't give it to them. It was just simply because of the circumstances. Yeah. And there are different ways to overcome this sort of ethical dilemma. And that is with the different study designs that you can do. So have a look at that, please. I wanted to go to this one. Presenting your work. Now, of course, one thing is, what are the results? And for that, you just simply take your mock data that you've analyzed, and you said, these mock data were analyzed with a particular test, say Welch or whatever test you fancy. And as I said, your data can be as simple or as complex as you like, the mock data that you make up. It could be a 2-column biomarker, whatever this biomarker is. It could be a 2x2 contingency table, where you say, for example, I want to test whether there is a link between HIV and between a drug and a particular form of HIV. Yeah, so a 2x2 table like we did yesterday. Last year, when we started that, one student submitted sort of screenshot of a clinical data set that she found somewhere, where there were 358 patients with 20 variables. 358 times 20, that is around over 7,000 data points. Don't want you to do that. But screenshot is a little bit challenging for that, and you can only submit one file. So keep it simple. Yeah, it's the KISS system. You know KISS? Keep it simple, silly. Right? Yeah.
So can I just summarize the assignment is we're going to use the PICO framework, write a justification for our research question, no more than 200 words, do your mock data and the flow
Prisma,
chart, the
search,
flow chart,
yeah,
the mock data, and then the abstract.
bingo. Yeah, simples. But for the results, I also want you to take note of how you report the results. Yeah, and we briefly touched upon that, where I said p-value, sample size, and so on and so forth. And on my wonderful website, there is also something called reporting statistical results, where you see, for example, here t-test, report, mean. That is basically, can I enlarge that? No, I can't. But you have a look at it where I basically say, this is what the result was. Now, very important, and last year, I think I didn't make it absolutely clear. This is something I want in the abstract, because the abstract is not a teaser, you know, not like a film trailer. Oh, look, this is what might happen. No, the abstract is a summary of what you have done. This is what people are looking for when they do a Prisma flowchart. Yeah, they read that and they say, yes, it has the results in it. I can see it at a glance. This is the result. And now I get the paper and actually look closer at it. So include results. That's absolutely important. And include your conclusion. What the hell does that mean? Of course, you don't say what the hell, but you know, this is the conclusion. Multi-drug treatment is superior to a single drug treatment when looking at young men in South Africa, because it reduced the virus load by such and such. We therefore conclude that this might be a valid treatment for larger populations. However, we are aware that these drugs might be potentially dangerous to pregnant women, and that is something for future research. Full stop, end of story, submission. There should be 2 Turnitin boxes set up for you, but I need to check that they actually work for a change. One is a draft inbox where you can look at, for example, your similarity score. You have done that in other modules, yeah, so I don't need to tell you that. And then there's the final one, and I want this by Friday, I think it is the 13th of December, yeah? Friday the 13th, midday. Because it is not a timed thing, ILPs will not, don't need to be taken into consideration. If you've got any questions, if there's something not entirely clear, within reason, let me know. I have a lot of other things to do, but I want you to succeed. And if push comes to shove, I will say, nope, you are not on the right track, or yes, well done.
What is the marking criteria for such?
Fantastic. I'm glad that you asked. Okay, so on the website, there is an example assessment with my annotations that you see exactly what I want. And lo and behold, if it comes up, there is also a mark scheme with rubrics where you can see exactly what we are looking for. Yeah? Am I good or am I good? Good, thank you.
Depend on the people.
Goat.
Good square.
Good squared. Thank you. Any questions? Are you happy with that? It is a challenging assessment, but this is what I want you to do then in your dissertation project. Yeah? So this is a good test run for you where you hopefully get the right skills to be totally successful in your research career. Thank you very much. That's all from me. My colleague, Dr. Chris Mulligan, will then take over. And I wish you all the very best of luck. I might see some of you then for the master's projects. But it was an enormous pleasure to work with you. And if you've got any questions or problems, please let me know.
So is it up to us to dissertation?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Can do whatever you want.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And be good. Don't do anything I wouldn't do.
The question is,
What exactly is the difference between research and dissertation?
Okay.